In this video I'm taking out that Jaguar engine and replacing it with that one.
Not strong enough for this one.
And push it down. You see? Well, the new engine is in. Here's a look at the old one. As you can see, it's completely black on the inside. The new one was much cleaner. This one has got 68,000 miles and this one has got 100,000 miles, so hopefully it's a lot better. The engine tuner had a look over the engine before I installed it, and the bearings, big end bearings, are fine. I used a scope to look in at the valve stem oil seals and they look good too. It's taken me a couple of months to put this all back together, so I'm just about to do the first start, so fingers crossed. Rule number 1. Check if there's fuel. I don't think there is. Okay, so I fueled up. I'm just going to run a few last minute checks here before I start it up. Recalibrating the throttle position now. Here's the throttle opening. And we're up and running. When I put everything back together, I was getting a leak from these two top coolant hoses. So it turned out that the clamps that were on them were just not clamping it tight enough. I changed them over to these kind of Michelor style ones that are a lot stronger, and the problem seems to be gone away now. So the engine is idling really smoothly now, but if you give it any sort of revs, it's very, very tappety. Even when it warms up, it doesn't seem to calm down. Seems particularly to be louder from this side than the other. There's a lot of different advice online about, do these engines use tappets or, buckets or different overhead type engine situations. So I've got my old engine here and I just thought I'd pull apart a few bits to see how it all works, and if there is any wearable parts. I'm thinking just down here. I'll investigate how that all works. I believe there's some shims in there, but again, it's hard to find exact information on this. So let's just dig into it. These are the buckets. Little focus. And what I don't know is, are the spring retainers, is there shims in there, or is the adjustment in the bucket, or is there any adjustment at all? That's what I'm going to try and do a bit of research on. I found the guides on how to check the clearances to the tappets and the specs here. So I'm using my feeler gauge, and basically you combine the range that you want to put in, and it should be just touching. It's actually, the spec I'm getting on this scrap engine is roughly about, I think about 0.165, which is actually out of spec for the intake. It's too small of a gap, but I'm just going to figure out how all this works here on the scrap engine anyway. I'm not going to worry too much about this particular one, and do a few measurements on the intake and exhaust. Hopefully I should be able to do this in the car, certainly for the measurement side of it. If I do need to adjust it, essentially it means you need to take out these tappets, and there's a shim that sits on the top of it that's adjustable, so you take out the shim and you can put in a different size one to make sure it's within that spec. But I think to get all those out, you may need to take the timing chain off, so it could turn into a big job and might be engine out. So I guess I'll just check the clearances first and then go from there.
It looks something like this.
Okay, this is how you check the valve clearances. You turn the crank until one of the cam lobes is opposite one of the tappets here, and then you get out your feeder gauge. So in this case, I've matched up 0.19 if I combine all these, and this one in here just slides in with a tiny bit of friction. I'm not pushing it at all. If you use one that's too large, it actually ends up pushing that down against the valve spring. So I'm going to make out a map then of all of the valves. The intake and exhaust valves have different specs, and then I'll run through them all and see which ones are inside spec and outside of spec, and decide on the next steps. So I finished all the clearance measuring now on one bank. All of them were within spec except for one on the exhaust side. So I went back and re-measured it again, just cleaning out the feeler gauge, making sure there was no dirt trapped in between the gauges, and it is fine, it's within spec. So this side was far more noisier and tappetier than this side, so I don't really know what to think. I mentioned that I had changed these clamps because I'd been getting a leak of coolant down. You can see actually some of the remnants here, and I thought that had solved the problem. I see some more there, so my guess is actually that it's actually there's some pooled inside here as well. Is that it's the seals on this piece here. I'll show you on this engine. So there's two seals here, rubber seals. There's a ring here and a ring here. So I'll order them and put them into this engine. Hopefully that'll solve the leak. quite a lot of crud in on this side as well on the engine, so I'll just clean that out before I fit it back in. So I've checked the valve clearances, I've replaced a couple of seals on this water pipe. I tightened up some of the exhaust manifold nuts. So I'm curious to see if it's still making this noise. So these are the VVT solenoids that are taken out of my scrap motor before I go doing it in the motor that's in the car, just to have a look at them. So I've just cleaned them up a bit. This one seems to be relatively okay. They weren't making any noise in the previous engine, so I might reuse these. But the one thing I would say is the actual filters here on one side, you can see there's actually starting to split there. These filters can be replaced pretty easily, you just pick them out of here. But on the other side, the filter is completely disintegrated. This part here, and all of that wire mesh, it can get caught in the plunger here. Actually stop it operating. This one still seems to be operating okay, but I'll show you how it works. If you apply 12 volts to this. So I've taken the cam cover off again, and I've removed the VVT solenoid from here. So here it is, and when I power it on to 12 volts, you can hear it's clicking on and off. It's in much better condition than the other scrap motor that I have. It's a lot cleaner. There's no damage on the filters. So that's probably bad news. I will swap in one of the scrap motor VVT solenoids and maybe just try it on one side. This side seems to be a lot noisier than that side, and just see if it works. And if it's the same problem and it's really noisy, most likely it's the actual VVT unit itself, which is this. And to fix it, you can either try and flush it out using different types of oil, or else most likely you would need to actually replace it with a new unit. To get that off means taking off the whole front cover, the engine, the pulley down there, which is quite tricky to get off. You need a special tool for it really, or decent pullers. And more or less it would mean taking out the engine. It would be very difficult to do that in place. So it's a massive job. I really don't want to do that if I can avoid it. So wish me luck. On the plus side, one thing I was really worried about was the big end bearings were gone, just like the last engine, and that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be kind of isolated to the VVT side of things. So you know, I'm not going to have to replace the engine again or to try and dig further down into the engine to fix all this. I've isolated to the VVT side of things, which, you know, could either be an easy fix or medium hardness, but we'll see how it goes. Alright, I've swapped over the solenoid now just on one side, so I'm just going to turn the car on. Well, that's pretty conclusive. Changing a solenoid didn't change anything. Solenoids on both sides seem to be working okay. Really, it's down to the actual VVT mechanism itself. So that means, unfortunately, taking off the front cover and changing those. So I'll have to price them as well and see how expensive they are. You could run this engine without VVT I might look into that and see how much of a horsepower gain there is from it. It might not be worth the hassle, but I'll see how it goes. Just doing some investigation here. I've just taken off the front cover. You need to take the pulley off to get that off. And I wanted to dig around and see how the VVT system works. So the solenoid is placed down in here, and there's a passageway in down there, you can see it, and that basically comes up through here and out through, there's a hole in there, and I had to take off this whole VVT unit to see how all that works. So there's a couple of pieces here, and there's a couple of springs then that spring it all together, that hold it all together. There's also this access hole here, so you'll be able to get to that hole in there through this access port. And here is my plan. So what can go wrong is basically this passageway between here and here that pressurizes this VVT unit with oil can get blocked with sludgy oil and things like that if the wrong grade is used or if the oil changes weren't frequent enough. So what I'm going to try and do is basically access this on this engine, and I'm going to spray in some carb cleaner or something like that into that hole and try and free out any sludge that might be built up between here and here, because I know the solenoid is working now. So it's something inside here. Most likely it's the passageway and not all the gear sets and everything in there. Another thing that could be causing the rattling, but I'm not going to go there first. I'm going to try the VVT sides because it seems that like when you disconnect the sensor, it's the cause of it. Another thing that can cause rattles are these chain tensioners, but I don't think that's the case. But it's been very handy to have this scrap engine so that I can dig around on these and figure out how it all works before I approach the installed engine. This is a welder that my brother bought me about 18 years ago. I've never used, I've never got any training on welding or watched any YouTube videos really about it. Wish me luck. It's one of these stick type welders. Let's see what happens. Certainly got hot enough anyway. I couldn't seem to get a weld into here, but I got a pretty solid weld on the end. Basically it's just a 13mm nut onto a bolt with a 10mm end on the end. So I'm going to try it out on the scrap engine and see how it works. Nope. No, the weld is coming undone there as I start to loosen that off. Okay, so that didn't work. So next I'm going to try an Allen key and try and cut it out of here. I've started it already there. And extract that, and that should be exactly 10mm. I'll be able to get a spanner on the end and cut this to size. This is what's left of the tool. And this is the part I'll be using. So as you can see, it's 10mm. Okay, worked. So as you can see, I'm able to loosen off this center bolt. I might have to take this tool out before I do that. So the whole objective of this is to be able to clean out this channel without taking off the front cover. Okay, I've got the VVT cap off the VVT unit now in the engine bay. What I'm going to do is spray the greaser into the hole here, and it's going to come out the channel here. I've put some rags here so that I can see what's coming through, how dirty it is, there's any sludge or anything, but it'll pick it up there. It's not going to come into the engine. It'll block it off because I don't want to get the greaser in where it shouldn't be getting. I've now removed the pulleys and the water pump and some of the brackets and hoses. So my objective is to try and get off this front cover without taking all the intakes and everything off. So I should be able to do that by just loosening these 3 bolts which connect to the top cover on both sides, and then also on the oil pan on the sump itself there'll be a few bolts. I'm hoping I can take it off. I've left the alternator power and steering pump in place, but the brackets have been removed or disconnected, so in theory I should be able to just pull it out. So as you can see, this one is a hell of a lot cleaner than the other engine I had. So here is where the 2 tensioners are located. They push against these guides here that tension the chain itself. In the process of doing this, I'm going to be swapping out those 2 tensioners and also changing the gaskets for that front cover. So there's one in the center here and one on each side. To make sure that the timing doesn't slip on any of the teeth or anything like that as I'm loosening off the tensioners, I'm just going to mark up the chain and the cogs as well. This just slides off. This is just for the crank position sensor. You can see the oil pathways and how it's pressurized. So here is the OEM and the aftermarket timing chain tensioners, and you can see the design is very, very similar. There is some small differences. The piston size appears to be smaller diameter, and the contact point where it touches some of the guides here seems to be smaller, but the design of this section with the spring-loaded teeth, this pin here is to hold the tension of this spring-loaded tooth so that you can install it, and then once it's installed you pull it out. That's the way the OEM ones are as well. Then you can see on the reverse that the pathways are very similar design. There just seems to be one difference here, which is some sort of, it almost looks like a spring or a retainer or something. I don't actually know what that is, but it's not on the aftermarket one. The torque specs for these bolts is 25 Newton meters. And now I should be able to just remove this retaining pin and the tension will be applied. Okay, that's pretty firm there now. We just gave the inside of the front cover a bit of a clean up, and now I'm going to install new gaskets. together now, so if this doesn't work, I'm probably going to have to get a whole timing chain kit. So I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. So while the new engine might not have the same issues as this one, it's got its own problems. I've been trying to replace one part at a time and not do a complete overhaul, but it looks like I'm going to have to go ahead and replace both timing chains and all of the timing gear. So I'll show you what that includes. In a timing chain kit, the parts that you get are a chain for each side, a set of guides, so there's 2 guides for each side, and a sprocket on the bottom. You also get a set of tensioners. Now I've replaced them, so the chain kit that I'm going to be buying is a genuine Jaguar part this time around, so I'll probably use the Jag ones and take off the spurious ones that I'd put on. Another item that I'm going to change is the VVT unit on the left bank, which is the noisy bank. I wasn't going to do this just because they're really expensive, and I thought I'd change the chain first and see if that worked. They're around about €400, if not more, each. Fortunately, I found a seller on eBay that has one where the box was damaged, the part is brand new, and he was selling it for just over €100. So I thought, well, why not? I'll replace it on one side, the noisy side, and see if that in combination with the chain and tensioners and guides and sprockets helps. So they are the next steps. Unfortunately, that means dismantling everything here again, taking off the front cover and doing it all. But hopefully it'll be worth it in the end. I'm guessing this time around I'll have to take off the front covers and intake manifolds to get access to replacing this VVT unit. I was holding off releasing this video until I had the car running, because I was hoping to go out and take it on a test drive, take lots of lovely beauty shots and, you know, audio clips of it running and smoothly and on the road. But the reality is it's going to take longer to do now. I'm going to do the whole timing chain kit. So I thought instead of waiting another month or 2 until that's all done, because I'm doing this in my spare time obviously, I'll just get out a video now and show you the progress. So talk soon. Slán.